Don't say that you took care of us with only $300,000. Clara, my eldest son's wife, berated me even though I had paid for their new house in full. After my husband died when our kids were small, it was a tough time to raise them alone 30 years ago. A sense of recession has been creeping. Despite normalization of the dual-income households, job opportunities for women after childbirth were mostly part-time. Full-time employment was a narrow gate to enter. I managed to escape a life of financial struggle and bought a new apartment for my eldest son and his wife, but far from being grateful. Clara was continuously rude. She insulted me. Unable to bear it any longer, I confronted my eldest son, Jake. "Don't you have anything to say, seeing me being spoken to like this?" However, he dismissively responded, "Why don't you just stop the payments?" Something snapped in me at that, and I retorted, "Gladly," and stopped all the payments I had been making, which led to, "My name is Grace. I raised 2 boys on my own and am 53 years old. I married at 20. Had Jake at 22, and 3 years later, I was blessed with my second son, Luke. My husband was kind and family-oriented, and those days were happy ones. He wasn't a high earner as an employee at a small company, but as a housewife. I would try to save money by buying the cheapest ingredients advertised in the flyers. I cooked stir-fried vegetables before payday. And grilled meat on payday. Our dinner menu clearly reflected our financial situation at the time. Just when my second son, Luke, turned 3 and we were discussing having a daughter, my husband died tragically in a car accident. It happened the day after we decided to name Sophia if a baby was a girl and Noah if a baby was a boy. With the income stopped, our family's life plunged into poverty immediately. The savings for our third child's birth expenses soon ran out, and I worked day and night. By then, dual-income households were becoming as common as single-income ones, but actual jobs were mostly part-time for a single mother. And post-childbirth employment as a full-timer was rare. Daytime wage was $8 an hour, and night jobs paid $10. While jobs at the nightclub offered better hourly wages, I was raising 2 boys in elementary school. I had reluctance to work at the nightclub. Not being a full-time worker, I had no access to bonuses, a significant extra income. Even though I managed to scrape by with the monthly expenses, unexpected costs were a nightmare. I could afford a new backpack for Jake, but not for Luke. This caused Luke to be bullied at school, and Jake was ridiculed as well. Wanted to increase my income, I started using the computer my husband had bought, looking for jobs I could do in my spare time. Affiliate marketing? Maybe I can do this in my spare time? I launched a blog called Single Mom's Childrearing Struggles, casually posting ads and links. That alone generated income. Thinking it would be nice to add a few $1,000s to our monthly budget, my side job unexpectedly hit big. I had no idea if I had a knack for writing, or maybe the title A Single Mom's Childrearing Struggles just struck a chord. My blog suddenly soared to the top of the popularity rankings. The money this brings in is unbelievable. I was shocked at the amount being deposited into my account each month, which led to magazine features and even lecture invitations. I started the affiliate marketing as feeling like grasping at straws, but it made me known as the affiliate queen. I quit the day and night jobs and turned affiliate marketing into my main occupation, holding lectures and side job seminars. My income soared and made it seem like a lie that I couldn't afford a backpack for Luke before. As I indulged my kids with anything they wanted, the balance in our family gradually started to crumble. From a life of financial constraint to a life free from that constraint, Jake began to live extravagantly. Unable to finish high school on time, he dropped out, not wanting to repeat the second year. He fell in with friends who had also dropped out and started hanging out in the nightlife scene, deepening ties with bad influences. Looking back, I regretted being such a foolish mother. I was caught up in the euphoria of escaping poverty and got drunk on the adulation from nationwide lectures. I will be away at a lecture for a while, so use this to buy and eat whatever you like. Known as a Ms. Bennett in public, I spoke in front of dozens, sometimes over 100 people, about my success with blogging and affiliate marketing. Receiving widespread applause. Working non-stop across multiple part-time jobs was the same as having a busy schedule, but the sense of fulfillment was incomparable. During my son's crucial teenage years, I wasn't there for them as much as I should have been. And I ended up giving Jake whatever amount of money he asked for. As Jake was guided by the police several times, Luke warned me, "Mom, you shouldn't give money to Jake so easily. He's being used by his friends as a cash cow." Luke, unlike Jake, didn't fall into delinquency and spent his student years diligently. Ever since the painful experience with the backpack, he started despising and avoiding those who discriminated or harassed others. Growing up to be a kind and had strong sense of justice. That's why Jake and Luke didn't get along very well. "You really should make Jake get a proper job," I was told. This advice came when Jake was over 20 years old. 3 years had passed since he dropped out of high school, and he couldn't stick with any part-time jobs. Even from his brother's perspective, it must have been worrying to see Jake floating around under the guise of helping his bad friends. I begged my acquaintance to get Jake a job at a publishing company. However, his stint there didn't last long. Repeated unexcused tardiness and absences led to his dismissal. I had a headache due to Jake's irresponsibility of being fired from a publishing house that I had a deep connection with, and which had published my blog and success stories. Having to apologize for the actions of my adult son, the other side also apologized, admitting their lack of proper guidance. It left a bad taste in everyone's mouth, a pointless time where no one benefited. "I just don't like working for others. I want to do something on my own," Jake would say, setting aside his lack of perseverance. And he wanted to start his own company. He established the importing goods company that was financed by me, and I only saw him traveling as a tourist to places like London, Paris, Australia, and Hong Kong, eventually retreating after accruing significant losses. "I have many close friends, so I'm sure I'll succeed," he said before starting a network marketing business. I even bought pots and water purifiers for Jake's sake, but this venture also failed, and he signed Luke up as a member without asking, further straining their relationship. Since he used Luke's name to sell pots and water purifiers to all his friends, Luke and I spent our days apologizing to them. Despite this, Jake fell in love with a woman named Clara he met through the network marketing business, and he decided to marry and work seriously. Hoping that marriage and having a family might instill some responsibility in him, I once again supported Jake. It was the new apartment for the couple. I paid for all the expenses of their new apartment. They didn't have a wedding ceremony because they recently quit network marketing and the financial situation was unstable. They wanted to open a wine bar in a prime location, so I financed their startup. Jake was over 30 years old at that time. He got married, and it was troubling that he was still constantly relying on me. Despite my help in securing jobs and funding startups, he has repeatedly given up, so Jake and I jointly established a company to run the store. I made it clear multiple times that this was his last chance as we went into business together. But, unsurprisingly, it turned out exactly as I feared. He boasted that his connections from the import business would allow him to get great wines at bargain prices. But it looked more like he was just hosting nightly gatherings with friends. "Grace, why don't you bring some friends over for a drink sometime?" Whenever I stopped by the bar, a nearly passed out Clara brazenly made this request. "Since you're an executive of the company, shouldn't you be doing something about sales, or this place might go under?" Ahaha. Watching Jake laugh sloppily in his drunkenness, I was speechless. Still, I could tolerate Jake's irresponsible remarks as a parent, but Clara's attitude only evoked disgust. "You know, I might seem like this, but I come from a really good family. My parents are super rich. If you ever need money, just let me know. I can help." She claimed her usual refrain while clutching an empty bottle of red wine. However, having met Clara's parents just once during their marriage introduction, I felt no sense of their alleged affluence. Only her brother Jacob's domineering presence left an impression. I always wanted a big brother, so I'm happy. At that time, I was concerned about how unusually attached Jake had become to Jacob. Months after the opening, the bar was recording losses of several tens of $1,000s monthly, and the startup funds I provided were depleted. I was covering the monthly deficits, but there was no sense of urgency or worry from Jake and his wife. What should I do? I couldn't stand it anymore, so I confided in my younger son, Luke. Since the network marketing incident, Luke had been avoiding Jake, but he listened empathetically to my concerns, saying, "I'll look into it." There were some things I've been curious about for a while. A week later, I visited Jake's store. The end of the month was approaching and rent and utility bills due were soon. I needed to check the sales and cover any shortfalls. It was 9 p.m. Despite it being peak hours for a wine bar, only Jacob's crew was present, and Jake along with his wife Clara were getting drunk at the same table. After several months since opening, how many times had I witnessed this disheartening scene? I sighed heavily and approached Jake, speaking up. Jake, if this continues, I'm going to close this place down. It wasn't Jake who reacted immediately to my calm statement. What's with the scary face? If you're so worried, why don't you do some marketing and bring in some acquaintances? Clara's slurred speech was nothing short of unpleasant. You said you would work hard with Jake, yet what is this mess? Although I strongly resisted speaking to Clara under normal circumstances, the situation demanded confrontation. What was she thinking, getting drunk every day with Jacob's friends? I couldn't help but confront her. I wasn't expecting a coherent reply due to their intoxication. But instead of Jake, it was Jacob who spoke up. What are you talking about? You're a co-owner too, quitting would only tarnish your own reputation. He sat arrogantly on the couch, his demeanor lacking any respect for his elders or family. A nouveau riche woman doesn't know how to spend money properly. It's fine, we're taking care of it for you. Incredibly, Clara's words were so outrageous that I couldn't help but become emotional in response. I lost my composure and retorted, how can you say such awful things? I provided the funds for this place and even for your apartment. Since I had made my children endure hardships and feel pain because of money issues throughout their childhood, I've felt guilty and allowed them to have whatever they wanted now that we were financially stable. But I couldn't stand her insulting me, who had paid for everything for her and my eldest son's new home. Then Clara brazenly responded, don't say that you took care of us with just $300,000, and turned away dismissively. Jake, I am being insulted like this, don't you have anything to say? I vented my anger at Jake for not defending me right in front of him. Stop the payments then. Jake blurted out his words with a drunken flush and not even looking at me, and something inside me just snapped. Gladly. I left the bar with those final words. As I stepped out, Clara's loud voice followed, go ahead and try it then. A few days later. As the month turned, I was summoned to the bar by Jake and his wife. It seems they were facing collections from various parties since I had stopped all the payments at the end of the month. It's okay, I'll go with you, Luke agreed to accompany me and reassured me. I arrived at 1 p.m. today for a discussion. I chose a time when that couple typically didn't drink, as we needed to have an important conversation. Jake, his wife, and even Jacob were at the bar. Jacob was the first to speak up. What's this, brought a bodyguard today? He said mockingly upon seeing Luke. It seemed like a confirmation. Ah, that's my brother. When Jake explained to Jacob, he nodded slightly and understood. His speech was clear and articulate, so I was relieved that it seemed he hadn't been drinking. However, it was concerning that while Clara and Jacob were seated comfortably on the sofa, Jake was the only one standing. You didn't pay the rent or utilities, but what are you thinking? Jacob thumped his foot loudly on the table and suddenly started speaking. I got angered by his rude behavior and I retorted, that's none of your business. No, it's not completely unrelated, let's continue, Luke intervened. I'm Luke, a lawyer. Clara and Jacob, who call yourself her brother. I am suing you for fraud and embezzlement. As Luke methodically laid out the charges, the three before him exchanged bewildered glances. Luke, when did you become a lawyer? At the time of the network marketing incident, Luke was still in high school. Since then, Jake hadn't had a proper conversation with his brother and was unaware of Luke's profession. Clara, you haven't officially got married with Jake yet, have you? But since you live in the apartment my mother bought with my brother and work in the store she funded, it seems you would be considered in a common law marriage. Luke ignored Jake's question and continued speaking calmly. What? We got married, right? Surprised by Luke's point, Jake questioned Clara. She sat up straight uncomfortably and stammered, well, that's... I had thought Luke's earlier mention of looking into things pertained to this. However, it appeared he had investigated far deeper and continued speaking smoothly as if prepared. Furthermore, you have been intimately involved with Jacob Parker and had lived together until just before you started living with my brother. Right? At Luke's next remark, Jake was surprised and interrupted. Ah, Jacob, so your last name is Parker? It was also the first time I learned this fact. Yet, I couldn't help but be frustrated by Jake's ignorance. Additionally, because you still have stayed at Jacob's place several times a week, you are also effectively in a common-law marriage with him, which constitutes bigamy. As Luke cornered Clara, she became flustered and turned to Jacob, who was sitting next to her. Wait a minute. Jacob, what's this about? You said tricking Jake wouldn't be a crime. In front of me and Jake, Clara was so flustered that she mentioned she had been deceiving Jake under Jacob's guidance. I was dumbfounded because her statement was essentially an admission of the crimes Luke was outlining. You approached my brother with financial motives, maintained relations through deceit, and created a state of bigamy. Sounds like marriage fraud too. Luke didn't miss their reactions and pointed them out calmly. There was no way to escape from the charges in this situation. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the previously domineering Jacob suddenly changed his tone. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to go this far. But you've been selling the expensive wines purchased for this store on a personal website, haven't you? That's embezzlement and clearly intentional and malicious. I recalled handing over the shop's ledgers to Luke when he asked me to show them. I was impressed by the thoroughness of his investigation. Please, I'm begging you, don't sue me. I'm on probation, it's a bad situation for me. Probation? I was confused by his use of a probation, but Luke quickly clarified. Probation. Oh, you mean the suspended sentence you got for a previous marriage fraud scheme with Clara before involving my brother? You were lucky to get probation after a plea deal the first time, but reoffending will probably lead to a combined sentence. A long sentence is well deserved. It all made sense now. I was convinced by Luke's explanation that these two had been caught for similar offenses before involving Jake. What about me? What happens to me? Then Clara, who was the former daughter-in-law and turned out to be fraudster, interjected selfishly. You're also on probation, so it'll be the same as him. By the time your term is complete, you'll be older than my mother's current age of 53. I was 53 years old and this woman was around 30 at this time. I wondered if there really could be a sentence of over 20 years. Since you reoffended while on probation, the previous 5-year sentence will be added to whatever sentence you receive for these crimes. With charges of embezzlement, fraud, and bigamy all evidenced, you should be prepared. Though I didn't understand the details and Luke might have been exaggerating, his words indicated the seriousness of the crimes. The two seemed resigned and fell silent. What? So I was a victim of deception? Luke, thank you. You've really saved me. Jake made an inappropriately light-hearted remark, assuming he was unrelated and thanking Luke with relief. We're pressing criminal charges against these two, but I'm considering a civil lawsuit against you, Jake. Luke calmly stated this to an overly cheerful Jake. What? I don't understand all that complicated stuff. Jake cried out pitifully. First, despite being a co-owner with me, Jake let Jacob dictate operations, neglecting sales and management. And for turning a blind eye to Jacob fencing off expensive wines, Luke was filing a claim for damages. If you don't mend your ways, Jake, I might even press criminal charges for breach of trust. Luke sharply made his point. In front of me, the three were apologizing repeatedly and begging Luke, please forgive us. Luke had heard about Clara's bad reputation since the network marketing incident, and it seemed he was aware of her existence. While attending university and studying law, he worked part-time at a detective agency, strategically building connections that could assist in investigations once he passed the bar exam. After graduating, he continued working at the detective agency while taking the bar exam, and last year he successfully passed, achieving his dream of becoming a lawyer. Despite being a novice lawyer, he was respected for his investigative skills. And I was somewhat in awe of his strategic approach and execution abilities. Having faced undeserved bullying in his childhood, he grew up to be a just and decisively active adult. The difference between him and Jake was stark, and I couldn't help but sigh. No, that difference was largely due to my failures in parenting, and I should be thankful that Luke took those bad experiences as lessons. Years later. In fact, Luke has not sued Jake, Clara, or Jacob. Rather, it seems he hasn't sued them yet. According to Luke, there are several years before the statute of limitations on fraud expires, and since the evidence was in place, there was no rush to proceed. He said he'd watch to see if the three genuinely repent and change their ways. Though I'm not familiar with the law, this seems almost like a threat to them, but it's amusing how much the three have changed. Clara now works in a nursing home, living on site without makeup, her hair and nails cut short, sweating through her daily tasks. Jacob has decided to become a monk at a certain church. He's still an apprentice, busy from dawn to dusk with cleaning and chores. Naturally, he's probably terrified of being prosecuted. As for my son Jake, whom I was most worried about, he has cut ties with Clara and Jacob and continues to run the wine bar alone. It's turned out his connections for importing were genuine, and he really could source good wines. Seemingly inspired by his brother Luke, Jake is now seriously dedicated to his work. The store is located on prime real estate, originally chosen by me. While it may not become hugely successful, consistent and diligent work should prevent it from continuing to operate at a loss. Perhaps waking up to reality, the bar is gradually gaining recognition as a place that offers good wines. Jake is faithfully transferring the amount specified in a written promise, which Luke asked Jake to draft, to me every month. If I see a little more of how things go and can confirm that Jake truly has changed, I'm considering turning the tumultuous story of this wine bar into a book and using the venue for the launch celebration.